Welcome and welcome back. I'd like to share a little bit more about how I connected my offline controller on my Gatton CNC to my power supplies, stepper drivers, and stepper motors, as well as a couple of my first drawings that helped me get started and a reference source I put together that's going to continue to help me on my CNC in the future. I built a CNC book to go with my CNC to reference information should I need it in the future. I purchased a Gatton CNC kit that does come with a full parts list with the plans in order to build. So if we open this up here, it looks like without the proper receipts, this information is not accessible. If you would like to find out how to get a Gatton CNC kit, check the description below for the link. Once I purchased my Gatton CNC, I had a good idea of what components I had needed from the website. So first, to help me out, I built a diagram electrical of what I thought my complete system would need. I wouldn't get too caught up on everything that's here. This is just a good idea of what I thought I needed, so I could have a good idea of how many components and which components I would need. I then drew another one which cleaned it up a little bit. This does not have every single connection. It has mostly enclosures and larger components so that I could visualize it a little bit easier. Then I made a per enclosure in diagram. This would be my power enclosure. And I have a real quick, did not even complete it for my driver enclosures. Once I had my enclosures drawn out, I then made a diagram for my wiring, the pins and the wiring that went to the pins. Same thing on this one. This is for my build, and every build may be very different. So I would recommend at least documenting or having something to reference on what your build wiring is. This is my offline controller, or DSP. I have loosened the bolts on the top so that we can take this apart to see how it is connected. So let's go ahead and take off the two retaining screws. Take the lid off and see if we can get this out. The nice thing about this is that this housing also doubles as a holder if you ever need to do any repair work on it. You don't have to worry about the screen getting messed up. So the power is going to be this cable here, which is just wrapped up in the main bundle. And in the manual, you'll see here, it's going to take an 18 to 32 volt DC, and I have selected a 24 volt. This is the inside of my power enclosure. It's normally mounted on the back of the CNC, but we brought it to the top so that we can take a look at it. The power is going to enter in through this 3-prong plug, which is illuminated for easy troubleshooting. Once on the inside, this will be that power line here, which will have the 3 lines that we need. We're going to have our line, our neutral, and our ground, which we will then connect to our terminal blocks at the bottom, to our line, neutral, and ground. With having these terminal blocks down here at the bottom, it allows us to power anything within this enclosure by just drawing power from the terminal blocks. I also included a 15 amp circuit breaker on my main power supply that was coming in for the CNC. So the power does come in, the line will go through the breaker before it goes into my main terminal block. In order for me to remember which power supplies are which, I just reference my diagram. On this 24 volt power supply, our terminals down here, we're going to have our AC power in, we're going to have our line, our neutral, and our ground. And then these 6 terminals are going to be our DC connections. We're going to have 3 for our positive and then 3 for our negative. To try to simplify this, I'm going to bring all the components closer together since everything is already mounted. So we'll have our offline controller. This is the manual page with all the connections, but it does have a nice printout on the back. So we'll just take a look at that. And then for our power, which is right here, the 18 to 32 volt power supply, positive being on the far right, we're going to grab that from our 24 volt power supply here. Need one of the positive and one of the negative to connect to the positive and negative. If you opted for the MPG, or the mobile pulse generator, the wiring for that is right here. Next to this is a USB extender where you'll load your USB drive that this will run off of. I have a picture of my X stepper driver because it's a little bit larger and easier to see how my offline controller connects to it. So in this section, we're going to have our stepper port. The nice thing about this offline controller is it does not require an additional 5 volt power supply or breakout board in order to run. This includes the breakout board inside, and the 5 volt power supply will run off of the 24 volt that runs in to power this unit. So on each side of this stepper port block, this little section, on the top, you're going to have a 5 volt on the left and a 5 volt on the right. And then on the bottom is the other directions for X, Y, Z, and A. And on the top, in between the 5 volts, you're going to have your step or your pulse for X, Y, Z, and A. So how you would connect this driver, or how I connected my stepper driver, is I took the positives. I took one of the positives, doesn't matter which one, either side, and connected it to my 5 volt positive pulse, and then jumped it, so it just had a little jumper wire, to the 5 volt positive direction. At the driver enclosure, I want to take a closer look at this connector here, because this is the one that jumps our 5 volt positive from our pulse positive to our direction positive. So if we open this up here, this is a picture of this one here. And on the back of our DSP, we have 2 5 volt terminals, positive. Everything else is negative. We only need one of them, so we bring one signal into this terminal block, and I split it into 4 signals coming out to each driver. So if we take our X as an example, we'll just pull this here. Here's this connection. And then that one, or I should say one of the 4 signals coming out, goes into my positive 5 volt, and then that has a jumper wire to connect the direction 5 volt positive. And then since we have 2 Y drivers and only 1 signal coming out, we did the same thing with the negative pulse and the negative direction signal from the Y. We just took the signal going in and then brought 2 out and then ran them to their corresponding terminals down here to their drivers. And then the negatives, I took the negative pulse, which is a negative step for the X, and then connected those 2. And then I connected a wire from my negative direction X to my negative direction on my X stepper driver. And then just did the same thing for the other drivers. The positive goes to both the positive pulse and direction, and then everything else is negative here, so the negative Y direction to the negative Y direction. Negative step is pulse, so negative pulse here on the Y, and then so on to the other stepper drivers. This is one of my stepper motors. Here's one of the information sheets for the stepper motors. And here we'll get our corresponding colors for our coils. So we have 4 wires, and our black wire is our A positive, our green wire is our A negative, our red wire is our B positive, and our blue wire is our blue negative. And then what that means for us is we know now, with this information, which wires we're going to hook up right here. So let's take a look at my information sheet for my stepper motor. So here on the stepper motor, we're going to see that we have two coils, and here we'll have A positive, A negative, B positive, B negative with corresponding colors of the wires. So we need power to go through our stepper driver, and then from our stepper driver to our motor. So to get power to our stepper driver, we have to go from our power supply, but to get our power supply, we go from our AC to our AC terminals. And then from these AC terminals, we'll have 3 AC terminals on each one. We'll have a line, neutral, and ground. Line, neutral, and ground. And then we'll have our DC terminals, 3 positive, 3 negative, and then 3 positive, 3 negative. We'll just need to grab one of the positive terminals and connect it to our positive terminal here. We'll grab one of the negative terminals and connect it to the negative or ground terminal here. And then we'll do the same for our other stepper drivers, our other Y, our other X and Z. Now for our motor, we're going to have 2 coils, and we'll see the coils here. We'll have an A and we'll have a B. So our A positive is a black wire, and we'll connect that to our A positive here. Our A negative will be a green wire, and we'll connect that to the A negative here. B positive is a red wire, and we'll connect that to the B positive here. Our B negative is the blue wire, and we'll connect that to the B negative here. And then you'll have connected the power and both coils for the motor. And you'll connect each motor, stepper motor, to each stepper driver the same way. You may have noticed some components that I did not explain in the video. These components are for my VFD and my water-cooled spindle. Since I chose a water-cooled spindle for my CNC, I'll do a separate video on that in the future. I hope some of the information that you have seen has been helpful. For an added bonus, I'll add timestamps so that you can reference information should you need it in the future. Thank you for watching.